I don't know where to start. That's not a line. That's the truth. The hardest thing for me to do is to begin. That goes for very nearly anything. Giving speeches, writing lesson plans, getting up in the morning, grading, vacuuming, asking for help when I need it. It's all about momentum for me. I'd much rather find myself in the middle of doing something, no matter how difficult, than to have to deliberately take the first step. Part of this is down to perfectionism. I so want to get things right. I want the reality of what I am doing to match what I imagine it should be in my head. And if I can't make it meet that impossible standard, then I'd rather leave the page blank than do something that falls short of perfect. This is, of course, a great way to ensure that I get absolutely nothing done. In undergrad, this meant that I'd sit down to write a section of my honors thesis, pound out 3 or 4 pages, and then decide it was all terrible and delete all of it. Every last word, even the footnotes. And the thing was, I was entirely aware that this was a self-sabotaging, unrealistic way to try and work. Ultimately, after weeks of meeting with my thesis advisor with pages and pages of notes and ideas and translations, but no finished work, she told me it was time to get over myself. "You're not going to get it right," she said, "because there is no right. There is no perfect. There is only work that is better and work that's not there yet." And I, expert that I was at 21, didn't believe her. I assumed Dr. Vocal was being her overly kind self because it seemed to me that everyone I knew was better suited to what they were doing than I was. My friends were brilliant and talented, and I loved listening to them talk about the ideas that lit them from within, burning with excitement and purpose. They, I felt certain, wrote pages of faultless prose. They understood how to study effectively, could balance school and work and friends and relationships without breaking a sweat, and they didn't feel their hearts race with anxiety for no discernible reason at 4 a.m. Surely they were capable of perfection. But regardless of how I felt about my advisor's assertion that perfection wasn't a thing that existed, she did have a point about me needing to get on with the work. I was running out of the semester, and the looming deadline was more frightening than any awkward argument structure or sense of inferiority. So, desperate, I went home that weekend, and I came back with my mother's old electric typewriter, because there was no way to delete on that typewriter. And I had 16 utterly terrible pages of my thesis written by the middle of the next week. And they were terrible, and almost nothing of them made it into the final draft that I submitted at the end of the year. But they were my terrible pages, and most importantly, they were a start. They weren't perfect, but they were something. Sometimes, though, it isn't the notion of perfection that holds me back. Sometimes I don't want to start something new simply because I am frightened of it, because the thing ahead of me seems so monstrously beyond my ability to handle it, because I can't see around it, because stepping forward to begin means that I have to confront an idea or an experience or maybe even a person head on rather than scuttling at it from the side and hoping nobody notices. I am not a brave person, and I am not confrontational by nature. Speaking in front of crowds scares the daylights out of me, to say nothing of directly arguing with people. And this may sound like an exaggeration to some of you, especially those of you who have been in my classroom multiple times over the past 4 years, but I assure you it isn't. If I ever seem like I know what I am doing, it is simply because I have done it so often that the fear is as familiar as an old overcoat at this point. I am never more scared than I am on the first day of the school year, standing in front of a group of judgmental teenagers who, as delightful and as challenging as they are, I have to somehow win over, to convince them to buy into a class that I love, to get them ready to dive into a subject that has great meaning for me, but which to them might just be another hurdle to jump. to try and hand them over lessons like tools, hoping that they understand that while the handle is worn, the blade is still so sharp, and it can do so much for them if they use it correctly. But no matter how much I prepare, no matter how much research I do, no matter how often I run through my plans in my head, no matter how many years I have done this very thing and lived through it, I am always staggered by how unready I feel when the bell rings. The only thing I ever want at 8:20 in the morning on the first day of school is another 10 minutes to prepare, as though 10 more minutes will somehow make all the difference. I am never ready to begin. But that doesn't matter. Because while I might rather play at being Hamlet and spend the length of my time on stage debating whether or not I even want to be here, the world around me is instead performing Henry V, crying out, "Once more into the breach, dear friends," and shoving me right into the middle of the battle, every time. Regardless of whether or not I'm ready to begin, the world is ready around me. It is ready for all of us, all the time, even if we're not. It doesn't matter if we have our lines memorized, or if we're frozen by stage fright, or if we want one more rehearsal. 10 more minutes. It doesn't matter. The bell rang, class is in session now, and it is time to start. So at the beginning of every year, I take a deep breath when I hear the bell ring. I remind myself that I may not be perfect, but I am not a blank page either. I have been working on this particular page for 34 years at this point, and I'm something. I'm enough. And eventually, if I work at it, if I focus on the things I can fix, the gap between perfect and enough closes to the point that no one but me even notices anymore. And I can live with that. Besides, I can't stall. I have a class of teenagers in front of me, and they can smell fear. So what's the point I want to make with all of this? Only that you have the broad, blank future expanding in front of you, and it may feel like you can't see around it. Only that you may have no idea where to begin, or what to say, or what you want at all. Or maybe you know precisely what you want, but can't bear to start because of the risk of imperfection, which is terrifying to you. I only want to say, me too. If you're frightened or apprehensive because we're taking the training wheels off and calling you adults now, it's okay. You're not alone. Adulthood is a weird idea anyway, laden with this notion that at some designated point we're all supposed to have all the answers, but we don't. None of us do. What we have are handfuls of notes and ideas and translations, and if we are very, very lucky, someone else to tell us, you aren't going to get it right, because there is no right. There is no perfect. There is only work that is better and work that isn't there yet. So just get to work, kiddos. Just get started. We'll figure it out as we go along. And I know you don't need it, even if you don't. But good luck, bonne chance, and buena suerte.